So I give this lecture every year, and I'll probably continue to do that every year as we move along. I think it's an important piece of I think it's an important piece of knowledge that should be people should be reminded of every year prior to Ramadan. There's nothing wrong with forgetting some of these things and being reminded of them again. The goal of this lecture is not to go into the detail of every single ruling and tell you what every single school of thought said, but rather to give you a broad brush of understanding of what is the majority opinion, and when applicable, I'll point out when there's a difference of opinion of which madhab said what, so that you can make your choice. Aside from that, you're attending the masjid here with me, so you can just go by my choices. And even if you have a madhab, you just go with the choices of your imam in the masjid that you are praying, and that is the most appropriate opinion to take when you're engaging in an act of worship. So not to delay any further, because this takes a while. We start with so Fiqh of Ramadan. Obviously, the month of Ramadan is the most blessed month of the year. The Sahaba, at least the narrations we have from some of the Tabi'een, they observe them take a lot of interest and show a lot of care towards Ramadan, as in prepare themselves months in advance for it, and then ask Allah for acceptance months after the month itself was over. And they learned that from Sayyid al-Khalq Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, as he continued to always observe Ramadan and care for it. And it is the high season of spirituality. And I haven't seen really a true change occur within a community or within an individual outside of this beautiful month. So I advise heavily that you take the time to learn about Ramadan from both perspectives. Now, everything in Islam, every act of worship has two things, has a zahir and a batin. And this is a simple understanding of life. There's the mechanical, and then there's the spiritual, that which is based on your understanding of things, your intentions, your feelings. But there's first the mechanical. So today, we're here to talk about the mechanical piece, so that you are performing the acts of worship the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to perform them. You're doing them in a way that is according to the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and you're meeting you're checking all the boxes to make sure that your acts of worship are valid, and you're doing that which is permissible. Next week, we'll talk about the other aspect of things. We'll talk about the planning. We'll talk about the spirituality, the bounties of Ramadan. We'll focus on that piece a little bit more, so that you enter, inshallah, this month, you're equipped with both. You know what the rulings are, you know what the do's and the don'ts are for this month, and everything that surrounds it, and you also enter, inshallah, with the right attitude and mentality as well. And I'm going to start with this piece because, wallahu alam, it's I don't believe that one of these two are more important than the other. Like, you can't say that the mechanical is more, or the physical or the zahir is more important than the batin, or vice versa. They are equally important, and that piece is very important, or critical to understanding Islam. The moment you say one is more important than the other, you walk with an imbalance for the rest of your life as a Muslim. You'll be imbalanced for the rest of your life. You have to care for both equally. You have to care about the fiqh, you have to understand how to do things, and you also have to care about the wad' al-qalb. You have to know where your heart is as you do it. And we're starting with the fiqh piece because it's a little bit more, it's easier, inshallah, to learn. And with a few reminders, inshallah, you'll know what's permissible, what's not. So number one is intentions. So it's a condition for fasting. Intentions, in terms of every other, for the majority of acts of worship, is a pillar, a rukn. Aside from the Hanafis who see it a condition at all times, the rest of the schools of thought see it as a rukn, because it happens, for them, it happens with the action. Meaning, the niyyah of prayer happens with takbirat al-ihram. The niyyah for hajj happens as you enter ihram, right? But for siyam, it doesn't happen when it begins. It has to happen before. If you make the intention of siyam for Ramadan after Fajr, then that day doesn't count. So you have to make the intention beforehand. So that's why it's a condition. Now, what is the intention? The intention is you just knowing that you're fasting tomorrow. So if you wake up for suhoor, then you've made the intention of siyam. Because why else would you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to eat? There's a reason. So you know what you're doing. The concept of intention is knowing what you're trying to do. So where does this become a problem? What's the example of this not being the case? Can I get the chair? I'm going to break my neck doing this. Because I can't see properly, and it's easier if I sit. So the example here that doesn't work is if someone is so out of it that they go to sleep that night, and when they go to sleep, they don't remember it's Ramadan. Like, they forgot it was Ramadan when they went to sleep. They woke up after Fajr, and they didn't remember it was Ramadan. And someone reminded them, by the way, it's Ramadan. He's like, oh, okay, I'm fasting. I haven't eaten yet. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. You have to have known that this was the day beforehand. Imam Malik, rahmatullah alayh, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him, offered us an outing. Imam Malik in his madhab does not require an intention for every single night. He requires one intention at the beginning of the month. like not next Friday, but the Friday after, at night, at our Taraweeh, you can make the intention that you will fast the 30 days of Ramadan, and for Imam Malik, that suffices. For the rest of the schools of thought or jurisprudence, they require an intention to occur sometime before Salat al-Fajr, but it's important to keep that in mind. I follow for this one. I think the Imam Malik's opinion is valid, so I offer it for people to use, inshallah ta'ala, with no haraj. But just remember that you are required to have an intention for Ramadan. For example, outside of Ramadan, if you wake up at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or even 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and you haven't eaten yet, and you're like, you know what? I want to fast today. No problem. As a nafila, as an act of worship that's extra or recommended, a sunnah, then you can do that. If it's an obligatory fast like Ramadan, or you're making up for an obligatory fast day that you missed, you have to make the intention before Fajr. Like you have to intend before Fajr. And you don't have to say it, you just have to know it. And the fact that you know that tomorrow's Ramadan at night, that suffices. You don't have to say anything. The Shafi'iyya, they encourage people to say things, not because it's only acceptable that way, but as means of reminding you, so that you are. And if you go to pray in Masajid fi Sham and in parts of Misr and Iraq, you'll find that the Shaykh will stand up and say, right after Isha, nawayna siyam ghadan min Ramadan li wajhi Allah ta'ala. People will say it, and that way they get out of the khilaf of this whole issue. But I think the opinion of Imam Malik here is very valid, so you can make the intention at the beginning of the month, inshallah, that suffices for you. Okay, so what's the general rule? Here's the general rule that will guide you throughout as I give this talk. So anything that is taken intentionally and provides the body with any degree of the medical definition of nourishment or its equivalent, it invalidates your fast. So anything that you intentionally take into your body that offers you the medical definition of nourishment will invalidate your fast. And so if you take that, you can apply that rule almost without any exceptions. And most of what I'm going to explain to you is going to be based on this ruling that is understood. So when you look at the books of fiqh, the imam that is giving the ruling on certain things that will break fast or won't, is basing it on this rule, this general qaida fiqhiyya, that and they obviously interpret different actions to be intentional differently, and they also interpret different substances to be medically nourishing. Today we have better definitions of these things because I can tell you what's nourishing and what's not nourishing, and it's easier to have that discussion. All right, so I think we start by knowing these things. Knowing these six things will invalidate your fast. So number one, if you eat and drink intentionally, which is a no-brainer, everyone kind of knows that one, if you eat and drink intentionally. Number two, sexual intercourse or its equivalent intentionally. And number three, intentional vomiting. And these three are intentional, meaning the word intentional has to exist at the beginning of the sentence. Because if they don't happen intentionally, then they don't necessarily invalidate your fast. So these three have to happen intentionally. You eat intentionally, you drink intentionally, you have relations with your wife, or the person has the equivalent of that even on their own. If you reach an orgasm and you've done that intentionally, then that suffices. You'll lose your fast, and intentional vomiting will also cause you to lose your fast. Number four, parenteral nourishment. So that's when they take in the IV. And you can take you take different types of nourishment in the IV, and the physicians know what I'm talking about here. And that is not just actual bags of lipids that are offered to people who can't eat, but also normal saline or Ringer's lactate or any form of just fluid. Once it goes into the bloodstream, that will invalidate your fast, even if it's unintentional. Even if you are just lying there and someone somehow snuck a catheter into and put it in, it doesn't matter whether it's intentional or not for this one. This one, you will lose your fast if that happens, regardless. Same thing as smoking. So whether it's tobacco, whether it's vaping, shisha, hashish, it doesn't matter. Any form of smoking will invalidate your fast, even if it happens by mistake, even if you forget. Even if the person is a smoker, forgot, pulled out the cigarette, turned it on, is not thinking about it, took a couple of puffs and then remembered, it doesn't matter. You lost your fast for that day. It's not treated like food and drink. And you ask, well, why? Because we don't have because we don't have a specific wording. There's no qiyas for this one. This is an act of ta'abbud. This is an act of pure worship. We don't do analogies for this one. Whatever he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, is acceptable in terms of the fast not breaking if you do it unintentionally. We stick to that. I can't draw analogies from it because it's an act of pure ta'abbud. So if someone smokes forgetting, they lose their fast for the day. And the fact that they forgot doesn't make a difference. And then the last one is hayd and nifas, which is basically the menstrual period or the postpartum bleeding that happens to a lady who's given birth. Right? So these six things invalidate your prayer, your fasting. Memorize them, know them well, because they're important. So eating and drinking on purpose, sexual intercourse purposefully or its equivalent for someone, intentional vomiting, any form of parenteral nourishment, smoking, and hayl al-nafas for ladies. This will invalidate your fast immediately. Okay. So actions that don't invalidate your fasting. Now what I'm putting up there, by the way, bil-ijma', meaning this is what all four schools of thought agree upon. Like all four schools of jurisprudence, the mu'tamad of their madhab, meaning what the opinion that is accepted, at least in the mutaakhirin and the later scholars, is what I'm sharing with you. The issues of difference of opinion I will put up for you so that you can see, inshallah, with your eyes as you go along. So what it doesn't invalidate your fasting is brushing your teeth. So it doesn't invalidate your fasting. Unless, for some weird reason, you decide to eat the toothpaste. And in that case, it's not brushing your teeth that invalidated your fast, it's because you decided to eat toothpaste. So if you don't do that, then using toothpaste upon your teeth and spitting it out does not invalidate your fast. Using a miswak does not invalidate your fast either. Scholars, they discussed whether doing your miswak after a certain time during the day would invalidate your fast or not, or is makruh, meaning it's not recommended. And some scholars say it's not recommended, but then a lot of them went back and retracted and said no, it's fine. And the majority opinion is that you can use miswak and you can use brushing your teeth any time during the day. It's not a problem. Now, if you brush your teeth with toothpaste and you swallow something of the toothpaste by mistake, you invalidate your fast. All right. So if you do it by mistake, you invalidate your fast. So you can't. So you're taking a risk whenever you're doing it during your siyam. But doing it on its own does not invalidate your fast. So if you have good control and you know what you're doing and doing it slowly, then you're fine. But if you're like, oh, I made a mistake and I swallow, well, that's on you. So be careful. So brushing your teeth on its own does not invalidate your fast, but making a mistake may. So it's not forgiven. Number two, eating and drinking forgetfully. So if you eat or you drink and you forgot, then your fast is fine. It's not invalidated. If you observe someone who is doing it, let them finish what they're doing. You're not the fasting police. This is not your job. No one has hired you for this. So if someone by mistake, you know that they're fasting and they're drinking water, let them finish. Or else you will throw them into a panic, where they don't know what to do anymore. And then if you tell them as they're drinking and they panic and they don't know what to do and they swallow the water, now they invalidated their fast and now it's on you because you went ahead and you said. So let them do what they're doing. Even if someone's munching on something, they forgot and they're eating something, let them finish what they're doing. And then remind them once they're done. As the Prophet ﷺ says in different narrations, فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fed this person or granted them. And look, there's no regulation when it comes to fasting. This is something between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no judge here who can determine whether you're fasting or not. I remember when we were kids, they would make us come and put our tongues out. And they would look at our tongues and based on, I know now that they were all lying at the time, and they would determine whether we were fasting or not based on the color of our tongues or something. But really, and this was just to encourage kids to fast. It was not a good way, but that's what they did. For you, there's nothing. So if you sit down and you dig into a tanjara of rice and you're like, well, I forgot, it's fine. If you actually forgot, then it's fine. And if you didn't, honestly, people around you shouldn't really care. This is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And fasting is one of the few acts of worship that have that, where it's very, very personal. And no one has the right to actually watch upon you or judge you because this is something that's very that's very personal. Unintended sexual pleasure. So if someone falls asleep and wakes up after having a wet dream, it doesn't invalidate your fast. For example, if you sleep during the day of Ramadan and you wake up and you find that you've had a wet dream, it doesn't invalidate your fast. If you sleep at night and wake up after Fajr time and you've had a dream, it doesn't invalidate your fast either. So this does not take away, it doesn't ruin your fast as long as it's unintentional and you're within your sleep. I don't know how unintentional could exist outside of sleep. Some scholars talk about that in the books of fiqh and they have this long rationale. I don't get it, so I'm not going to explain it to you. If you run into this problem, come and ask and we'll talk about it amongst ourselves. Number 4, intramuscular or subcutaneous medical injections that are not nourishing. So intramuscular or subcutaneous. These are agreed upon today. Now, you can say, well, where in the books of fiqh does this exist? Nowhere, because when the books of fiqh were written, this didn't exist. Like there were no huqan adaliyah. We didn't have intramuscular injections or subcutaneous injections. So what am I basing this on? I'm basing it on the fatwas that were given from the large groups of scholars that belong to one madhab or two. So that's what I'm basing it on. So, and the majority of scholars that belong to the madhahib after careful review of what this is, a non-nourishing injection that is subcutaneous or muscular. For example, someone who's on a blood thinner. Some of the blood thinners will be subcutaneous. That doesn't break your fast. Sometimes you'll be on antibiotics that are intramuscular. It doesn't break your fast. Insulin under the skin, it doesn't break your fast. Insulin is not nourishing. It does regulate certain things in the blood, but it does not regulate sugar in your blood in a way that nourishes you. If anything, it actually does the opposite, like it changes. So really, it's not nourishing. So all of these don't break your fast. If you have to take them, then you're fine to continue fasting, if obviously you don't have any other reasons to break your fast. Number 5, so swallowing one's own saliva. As disgusting as this may be, I have to point it out to you. So I'm not talking about like just the small amounts that exist in your mouth daily. No, I'm talking if you sat there and just accumulated saliva until it was a gulp, which is absolutely disgusting. But whether you do it or not, it doesn't break your fast. Fiqh is about technicalities. It's not a pretty picture. I'm not trying to draw a nice picture for you. I have to tell you what is and what isn't. So swallowing your own saliva is makruh. It is unrecommended. You should not do it. Bi-ijma' al-madahib al-arba', all 4 schools say you should not do it. However, it does not break your fast if you do it. Even if you do it intentionally. And I'm talking about here doing it intentionally. And then the last one is unintentional water swallowing after wudu. And there's some difference of opinion on this one, but the majority opinion still kind of holds for that. So if you're not required in Islam to do more than what the norm dictates. You're not required to go out and beyond for something. So if you're fasting, you're not required to make wudu and then do madmada and then spend 10 minutes just spitting out everything to make sure nothing comes in. No. What would you do normally when you make wudu? No one really drinks water during wudu, right? So you've been doing wudu for a long time now. What do you do normally? You do that normally. And if something stays in the mouth afterwards and it goes down the throat, it's not a problem. Now obviously if you're making wudu and you're doing way more madmada to the point where you're just hoping that something finds its way down, that's different. That's different. So at tafriq or negligence, you are accountable for that. You are liable for negligence within Islamic law. So if you decide to do something borderline to get what you want, then your intention there is actually what's ruining everything. But as long as you're making wudu normally and you're doing your due diligence, if something is stuck in and it goes down, it doesn't invalidate your wudu. But be very careful with this, obviously. Because it's not a loophole. Like we're not using this as a way for you to drink water, but also Islam does not require you to do something that's out of the norm. Like there's something in Islam called ma la yuhtarazu anhu. There are things that you can't avoid. The unavoidable, you're not accountable if you can't avoid them. And when you're doing wudu and you're doing madmada, like you're not told in wudu. Are you told by the Prophet ﷺ tell the Sahaba during Ramadan not to do madmada during wudu? No, he did it ﷺ, he told people to do it. So he didn't tell it not to do this. So you're not required to do beyond what the norm is, and if something's unavoidable, then it's unavoidable. So these are the 6. So make sure that you know these 2 pairs of 6 things. Know the actions that invalidate your fasting, and then know the actions that don't invalidate your fasting. So know that when you're brushing your teeth, unless obviously you're eating or swallowing toothpaste, eating and drinking unintentionally, unintended or unintentional sexual pleasure, intramuscular or subcutaneous under the skin medical injections that are not nourishing, and I'll talk about nourishing in a moment for you, and then swallowing one's saliva, and then the last one is unintentional water swallowing after wudu. These don't break your fast. Know them well because they happen quite often, and it's important to know. All right. So here are 4 issues of difference of opinion, and this is obviously I did a lot. I put all this stuff together over many hours of kind of going through a lot of details that exist today amongst the different scholars. And these 4, there is like more of a 50-50 breakdown amongst the scholars of the madhahib. So I'll tell you what I think for the 4, but you have to kind of make a decision, or you have to go and do a little bit more research on it if you have this problem. So number 1 are inhalers, bakhakhat. And this obviously, again, did not exist back in the day. However, it's talked about in terms of, because for the scholars, they have a rule of thumb is that anything that enters the sabilain, either from above or from under, will cause you to lose your fasting. But they didn't really go into detail if this substance was going into your lungs. Now, for smoking, you're getting nicotine. You're getting something that is actually strengthening the body, giving you a little bit more energy. So it invalidates your prayer almost immediately. And it's for pleasure, so that the scholars don't accept it at all. Like there's no difference of opinion on this matter at all when it comes to smoking. When it comes to inhalers, you have a breakdown. There's a difference of opinion. Those who see it to be invalidating of your fast, and those scholars will say that if you absolutely require it, then that means you have an illness that offers you a proper excuse, a proper rukhsa or udhr to break your fast. The majority, or a little bit more than 50% of the scholars, see this to be something that does not break your fast. I tend to take that opinion on the first one. I don't see, if you're asthmatic or you have COPD, you have a lung problem, and you need to use the inhaler, and you know how to use it appropriately, so you're not swallowing it down your throat, you're actually sending it down the pipes, then I see that to be, doesn't break your fast because it's not in any form nourishing. What the inhalers do is that they just open up the bronchi. They allow for more air to go through, so they just allow for breathing, which is the basic human function. Siyam is not there to hinder your breathing in any way. It's there, Siyam, you're not bringing nourishment into your body. That is the illah, that is the reasoning behind it, but not to actually take away your ability to breathe. So I'm of the opinion that inhalers don't break your fast if you need to use them. Obviously, you have to need to use them, and you have to need to use them during fasting. Don't use them just because you're fasting and you find somehow when you use them you feel a bit better. That will break your fast. Intentions here matter, so it's about darurat. When we talk about these things, I'm talking about darurat, meaning there's a need. You're an asthmatic or you have a certain lung condition, you need to use it right now, then inshallah your fasting is valid and you can continue that day. Number 2, ear and eye drops. Again, we're not talking about any drops that are nourishing. Drops as in antibiotics, for example, in the ear, antibiotics in the eye. Again, there has to be a good need for it, meaning you have to be prescribed this by a physician. Don't just, suddenly in Ramadan you're one of those people who need to put the drops in their eyes because you have dry eyes or whatever. Like, make sure that this is a prescription based, meaning the actual physician tested you and saw that this was something that you require in order for you to function normally. And if that's the case, then again, the breakdown among scholars. But here there's a caveat. If you use one of these, and this is agreed upon amongst everyone, if you use one of these drops and the drop itself makes its way down your throat, then your fast is gone. Agreed upon. If it goes down your throat, meaning you feel it trickle down into your stomach, khalas, that fast is gone. But if you're able to use these drops and it doesn't go down, then I'm of the opinion that it doesn't break your fast. Like, if it doesn't actually go, because the fastas inside our heads are actually quite connected. So if you take ear drops and eye drops and you actually pump a little bit too much of it, or you have a bit of an issue, or there's some degree of deficit within that area, then you can have that go down your throat. So if it goes down the throat, it breaks your fast, whether you needed it or not. But if you're using it because you're sick, then you have the proper legal, religious excuse for it. But I'm saying that if it doesn't go down the throat and you use it, I'm of the opinion that this does not break your fast either, right? As long as, but it has a condition to it, meaning it cannot go down the throat. Number 3, non-nourishing IV infusions or injections. So we've agreed that IV nourishing infusions break the fast bil ijma'. And non-nourishing subcutaneous and under the skin, and intramuscular don't. What about, and anything that's nourishing, so subcutaneous and intramuscular nourishing, which is very rare. I don't know if we have examples of that. Do we have examples of that? I don't think we have anything that's nourishing that goes in the muscle. They argue vitamins, but vitamins aren't nourishing really. Like, I don't know if vitamin B12, and honestly, there's not one time in your life where you need to urgently take a vitamin B12 intramuscular injection. Like, I don't think there's any example for that, and usually if you do, then it would be a first for me. So that's why that example doesn't really exist. The example where there's difference of opinion is IV, non-nourishing injections. Like what? Like antibiotics. So IV antibiotics, for example. What is that seen as? And there's a number of other different IV infusions that are not nourishing in nature. So what is the? So here, I'm of the opinion that it does break your fast. I think this breaks your fast for a couple of reasons. Number 1 is that nourishment also comes from how full the vasculature in your body is. So a certain feel of well-being for the human being is hydration. And fasting, you are getting a little bit dehydrated, and that's a part of the story, really. So when you do something that hydrates you, then technically you're kind of reversing the fasting effect, so it's breaking your fast. So if you take an antibiotic, for example, it comes in a bag of maybe 300 to 500 mils of fluid, right? So that fluid is filling up the vasculature. Yes, the actual substance is not nourishing, but that fluid itself is going into the veins, and it's filling the veins, so it's actually taking away. So Allahu A'lam, this is something that breaks your fast. Again, there's difference of opinion, so you could go back, research this, listen to the scholars' arguments who don't think it breaks your fast, and if that's what you want to do, you can go ahead. But my opinion on this matter is that this number 3 breaks your fast. So if you are taking anything in the IV, then I would just say, even if you're going just to get a CT scan and they have to put something in the IV in terms of to color then I think that still breaks your fast. Wallahu a'lam. And number 4, suppositories. So going up the other direction. And any form of using a bidet and stuff, it doesn't break your fast. This question comes up almost every year, and I find it to be, I find it to be a ridiculous question where they ask, well, if I use the bidet and water goes in, does that break my fast? I don't know. Does anyone here drink water from the other side? Like, I'm not sure, has this ever happened before? Like, I'm actually interested to know, are there studies on people who are capable of somehow retaining all the fluid from the other side and actually getting nourishment from doing that? So this question comes up every year, and it's very weird, where I think there's like a quoted scholar who once said that yes, it breaks your fast. And I don't know exactly what the context of that is, and I'm interested to know, because I never came across it in my life. But using the bidet is fine. Istinja is a part of Islamic law. Never did the Prophet ﷺ say you can't do istinja with water during Siyam. Like, that's not there. So, and even if the bidet is powerful, if someone says, oh, the bidet is powerful, how powerful? What do you mean? Like, if it's that powerful, then it's probably going to open a hole, another hole. Like, it's not going to work. So I don't believe that's ever going to be the case. But this question does come up almost every year. I get someone who sends me this question, and I always like, no, you're good to use the bidet. Don't drink from the other side is the only advice I give you. But suppositories are different. Suppositories are going in, this one here there's difference of opinions. Suppositories are usually antibiotics. Sometimes they can be enemas. Sometimes, like, usually they're not really nourishing. I still think that this breaks your fast for a couple of reasons. Number 1, I don't think there's a need. Like, there's usually almost never a need for this. To actually take a suppository during Siyam, and if there is, that means you're probably really, really sick and you should break your fast anyway. Like, it's very, very rare for an adult to absolutely need a suppository during the day. Like, it's very, very rare. And because we actually have wordings in the books of fiqh on it. Like, the scholars talked about this. Putting something up will invalidate your fast. Water is not seen as that because it's a part of istinja. But anything else will break your fast. So I think, my opinion on these 4, the first 2 don't break your fast. This number 2 with the caveat of it not going down your throat. And number 3 and 4, I believe, break your fast. Wallahu ta'ala alam. But I put them there as difference of opinion, so that if you are someone who, who has a struggle with one of them, you can go and you can look it up and you can make sure that you have good information on the topic before Ramadan begins. All right. So I'll share these slides so you can look at them again and you can share them with people. Inshallah, we'll put them in the WhatsApp group. So circumstances that allow one to break their fast, know these 4 well as well. They're important to know. So number 1, illness. If you are sick, then you can break your fast. It's a good reason. It's an important reason. But sometimes illness goes from a circumstance, an allowance to break your fast, to a must break your fast. So it's not always just an allowance. Sometimes it's an allowance, meaning it's okay to break your fast because you're sick. Sometimes you have to break your fast. You're sick and you must break your fast. Fasting will harm you, so you are commanded to break your fast. So it goes from a rukhsa to a mujiba. And this is important to understand because صحة الأبدان مقدمة على سلامة الأديان. The health of one's body is prioritized above the perfection of the acts of worship. So perfecting the act of worship are important, but your personal health it trumps that. It's more important. So if you are ill and the physician looks at you and says, you will harm yourself if you fast. You may likely die. Then you are commanded not to fast anymore. This is a command, because if you know this is going to harm your body, then you don't have the grounds to fast anymore. And I get this, at least one old Hajji will call me throughout Ramadan, and then she'll curse me out and all of my family, because he doesn't like the answer, because the family are telling her you shouldn't fast because the doctor says you shouldn't fast, and then she asks me, and what do you have? I have chronic kidney disease, and I need this and I need that. I'm like, no, Hajji, you need dialysis. Like, no, no, you won't manage with, you will die. You need to break your fast. You're actually not allowed to fast. And then she, but sub alay, and she closes she hangs up on me. So illness is a very good reason. It's an excuse for breaking your fast. Make sure that you use it when appropriate. And when you do that, you just make up for the day that you didn't fast, and you don't owe anything. You don't owe an expiation of any sort. Number 2, travel. So travel is a little bit more tricky. When it comes to shortening your prayer for travel, it's more lenient. So a lot of scholars don't stick to the 82 kilometers, for example. They're like, if it's just leaving the housing area, like you're just outside the city, then you can pray Dhuhr and Asr together and do 2 rak'ah and 2 rak'ah. So there's a lot of different opinions, and it's very lenient. Probably the Shafi'i and Hanbali opinion are most difficult of all. But for Siyam, there's a little bit more rigidity. It's a little bit more strict. So we stick to the 80 kilometers. So if you're going beyond 80 kilometers and traveling, then you can go ahead and break your fast. And as long as you're traveling, you can break your fast. So if you're traveling for a couple of days, you can break your fast. If you're traveling for a month, you're just moving from one place to the other, then you can break your fast every day. The issue becomes if you travel from A to B and then you stay in B for a long time. Can you continue to break your fast if B is temporary? Like I'm there for a couple of days. Well, if you're there for 3 to 4 days, you can break your fast, according to the Shafi'i and Hanbali opinion. If you go beyond that, as far as the Hanafis are up to 15. They allow for 15. Beyond that, you enter kind of a no man's land. This is where you just have sporadic opinions of scholars within the madhab and outside of the madhab who have opinions on this issue, who allow for it or don't allow for it. So my advice is that if you're traveling during Ramadan and you're traveling for more than a certain amount of time, ask. Go to an imam, ask this question: what should I do? And based on the argument, well, travel today is easy. No, it doesn't matter. If you're traveling, you have the permission to break your fast, even though you're not sitting on a camel in the middle of the desert with the winds slapping you in the face, and you're in first class and no. If you're traveling, you can break your fast. That's not negotiable. And if you're moving around every day, that is a traveling day where you're actually on the road, then you can break your fast. It's just when you go and now you're staying in one spot. So let's say you're going to attend a course somewhere for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So you travel. The day that you travel, obviously you break your fast. The day that you travel back, you break your fast. What about the time there? So some madhab are okay up to 3 to 4 days, some 15. There are scholars who allow for beyond that. It's fine. I don't advise it because it's very hard to make up for Ramadan after it. It's extremely difficult to make up for Ramadan after it. Ask the sisters. It's very difficult to make up for Ramadan if you miss it. So try not to break your fast during this. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Laysa min al-birri as-siyamu fi as-safar." ﷺ would point out that if you're traveling, don't fast. It's not birr. Why? Because traveling back then was absolutely horrific. It was very difficult. So fasting was putting yourself at risk. Today, I think it's a rukhsa, it's a permission. You're allowed to do it. But be wise about whether you choose to take this or not, just so that you don't lose days and then find it difficult to make up for them later on. Number 3, pregnancy and breastfeeding. I'm going to talk about that in more depth later on because I'm going to talk about expiation. But pregnancy and breastfeeding are both legal, religious reasons for you to break your fast for the sisters. Obviously not for the brothers. If you're pregnant or if you're breastfeeding, then you can choose to break your fast, and I'll tell you what you need to do in a moment. And then number 4, severe fatigue. And this is very important because this is dropped all the time in the discussions. Severe fatigue allows you to break your fast. So if you're a roofer in July, then you can break your fast. However, there's a specific system for this. You're not allowed ever to make the intention of not fasting the night before, ever, due to fatigue, ever. Even if you know that tomorrow you're going to be roofing in the middle of August and it's a sunny day. Even if you know that's the case, you don't make the intention of not fasting. You make the intention of fasting, you do your suhoor, and you start fasting. And once you come to a point where you now are fearing for your personal safety, your physical safety, you break your fast. And if you need to do that every single day throughout Ramadan, then you do that every single day throughout Ramadan. And if you're like, well, I could technically not work for the month. No. If you are the breadwinner of your family, and this is your job, then you have the right to go to work during Ramadan and break your fast when you feel that the fatigue is becoming too difficult. You have the right to do that Islamically. You're not actually told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't work for the month. You're not told to do that. Actually, that's not encouraged. It's not encouraged to do that. Yes? No, I mean, suhoor doesn't really offer you, like you do suhoor because it's a sunnah, there's a barakah of being awake at that time and taking something in. But I don't think not having suhoor actually makes the difference of you not being able to continue your fast. Like, I don't think the 3 or 4 dates and the cup of water that you have at suhoor is going to carry you through a day of a 17, 18-hour July day. Alhamdulillah, we're headed towards the nice years. You guys are going to be fine. By the time it comes back, and we'll all be dead. I'll be dead. I probably won't fast again in the summer. But we're coming to the nice years now. The day gets shorter and shorter. It's nicer and nicer. But for people who live in certain parts of the world, the southern hemisphere where the days get longer, it becomes a problem. So just understanding that severe fatigue is an acceptable reason. So if you're like, I am right now so tired that I can't see straight, I can't think straight, break your fast. You have a good reason. And you don't owe an expiation. Like you don't owe a kaffarah for this. You just owe to make up for the day later. That's it. Even if you missed all 30 days because you were working all 30 days and you could not complete the fast of not one day, you can make up for it later in the nice winter when the days are nice and short, and that's totally fine. So just know this as important. But you cannot enter the night, like you can't come before Fajr with the intention, oh, I'm not fasting tomorrow. No, the intention has to be, I'm fasting, I'm going to try my best to get to the end of the day. And if you can't, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts this as a valid reason, a religious reason for you not to fast. So these are the 4 that you should know very well. All right. So missed days of Ramadan must be made up for after Ramadan and before the following Ramadan. So you have to make up for your days before the next Ramadan. If you don't, you owe a kaffarah, you owe an expiation for that. And you carry sin, like you have to perform tawbah and istighfar for not fasting. So if you have, and this is especially for the ladies, because you always have like a week or so where you can't fast during the month. And then of course all of the ladies, they stack them all up the last 2 weeks before Ramadan, and then they're miserable, and everyone around them has to be miserable too because they won't do. Yeah, how many days did you miss? You missed the whole month, 30 days? There are 45 weeks between Ramadan. Do once a week, instead of making it all within 2 weeks beforehand. And the same thing for the guys. If you have a couple of days, don't stack them all up at the end of the right before Ramadan. Do them, spread them out so that you can make sure that you have them done nice and early before. If you don't, you carry sin for that, so you owe tawbah, and then you owe to pay for each day it'am miskin, to feed a needy person, like a full meal, so around $20 for each day. And then you only owe it that once. If you still don't fast them, and the next Ramadan, the Ramadan after that comes by, you don't owe another payment. You owe the payment only once. So you owe the kaffarah only once, but you still owe those days. Yes? Yeah, so you should ballpark it and then add something to it so that you're safe. Well, you should side on caution for that type of situation and see what is the possible highest number, and you go by that one. So now, if someone comes and say, I haven't fasted Ramadan for 30 years, I have 900 days of fasting. It's not going to work. Then you just pay for that. These type of situations where people, for example, perform tawbah in their lives and prior to that they weren't fasting altogether, then those people I actually don't think they should make up for the fasting days. I think they pay for all those days, kaffarah, and they just start fasting after that. It's like you weren't fully Muslim and now you are, if that makes sense. But in your case, that's probably not the issue. So just go back and make an estimate, and then just add a little bit more to be safe, and then start fasting them and just spread them out for the next couple of years so that you can get them done, inshallah. Fasting is not that hard once you get into the system of it. So understanding what expiation means in Arabic is kaffarah. Right? So there's 2 types of kaffarat for siyam. There's kaffarah kubra, a major expiation, and then there's a minor expiation. I'm going to talk about the major one here because that's what matters. It's important. You only owe the major expiation when someone performs sexual intercourse with their spouse during the day of Ramadan. This is bil ijma'. This is with consensus of all schools of jurisprudence. And there's a philosophy behind it. Whenever there's another party coming in to ruin the fasting, then you owe something for it. And it's an interesting aspect of how they understand kaffarat. But all schools of jurisprudence agree that if the man wanted it and the wife didn't necessarily want it and she was kind of pushed into this, then she doesn't owe it. He just does. If she instigated it or she was also on it, then she owes it as well. They both owe the kaffarah. And the reason that I'm pointing this out specifically is because the kaffarah for this is quite difficult. So it's either freeing a slave, which we don't have anymore, so you're stuck with one of 2 things. Either you fast 60 consecutive days, so 2 months in a row, or tut'im sittina miskina, you feed 60 needy people. So that adds up to around $1,200 or so. So it's a pretty hefty chunk of money. I had never seen, up till like maybe 2 years ago, anyone who did the fasting. Everyone just defaults to paying when they make this mistake. And subhanAllah, 2 years ago, I met someone who did it, who fast all 60 days. And it was a lot of barakah in their lives to do that. It's very difficult, but it was a beautiful achievement for them. And I think there's a lot of ajr in doing it. Now, if you break your fast intentionally in Ramadan, if you lose your temper or you don't have a good reason, and you just go and you eat intentionally, not forgetting, intentionally. The scholars are divided. Some of them say that you owe a full expiation, like the full one, and some of them say that you don't. I side on the side that you don't. I side on the side that you just owe, but just to explain something to you, to understand how horrible this act is, some scholars say that you don't make up for that day either. Why? Because you don't get that option. You broke your fast intentionally, you lost that option. So the people who are making up for the days of fasting are people who forgot, who made mistakes. If you intentionally broke your fast by eating, which is then some scholars, not the majority of them, some scholars say that you're not allowed to make up for it. That day is gone and it's gone forever for you, and you just lost it, and you carry the sin of it. The majority of scholars say that you make up for it, and I tell you to do the same thing. So if you broke your fast, I'm just kind of scaring you a little bit, never to do this, and to like, I guess, if you break your fast by eating or drinking, you don't necessarily. I don't believe. My opinion is that you don't owe the major expiation. You just owe to make up for it. But sexual intercourse is when that is owed for sure. All right. So minor expiation. So these these 5. So a minor expiation is feeding one person per day, which is around $20 per day. So someone who's terminally ill, if you have a chronic illness that we have no hope of you ever getting better from, you're not going to get better. This is not a curable disease. You're going to be with end-stage kidney disease, or or a difficult case of diabetes, or some types of cancer, a terminal illness where the doctor says you cannot fast, or fasting will harm you, and it's a disease that you'll never get better from, as far as medicine can tell. Allahu A'lam, Allahu Shafi, but as far as we can tell, you don't get better from. Then you can pay for the full month. This person can pay for the full month. Some scholars allow you to pay for the full month right before the month. Others say you have to wait until the month is over. You have to pay day by day. Because if someone, for example, passed away in the middle of the month, they only owe for the 15 days that they didn't fast. They don't owe for the whole month, right? So it doesn't actually become obligatory upon the person until they went through the day and didn't fast it. But if you want to save yourself from any headache, and you have a terminal illness and you can't fast, then pay up front $600 for the full month. And then what you do is you try your best throughout the month to show aspects of fasting. So you don't eat openly or publicly. The ladies, the same thing. So if you have a reason, or udhr, if you're ha'id, or is your menstruation, your postpartum, then don't order Popeyes and sit down and eat it in the middle of the living room. Like, try to just keep enough, and then have futur with the family. That's the sunnah. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He taught people to do this. So if you have a udhr for not to fast, then take whatever you need and take it out of the public eye, out of respect for out of respect for the sha'ira, for the ritual itself and the barakah of the month, and then have your full meal with the family once they have the meal. But terminally ill people, and usually you want this information from the doctor. So you want to go to the physician who follows you and ask them, can I fast? And they'll tell you whether fasting will harm you or not, and whether your condition is something that is curable or not. A temporary illness, like you got the flu, for example, that's a reason to break your fast. You just make up for those days once it's done. But I'm talking about a terminal illness, something that's not going to get any better. So you're never going to be in a position where you're going to be able to fast again. Then you just pay the minor expiation. And if you can't afford it, then you can't afford it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you. But if you can afford it, then that's what you should do. Number 2, elderly. So the elderly can, without having any terminal issues, can break their fast for the whole month and just pay expiation for it. How do you define elderly? I don't know. This is where they differ. Scholars have differed on this for a long time. I think anyone over 75 should qualify. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Now that will offend the 75-year-olds because they don't feel that they're old, but this is just where it's drawn. If you're over 75, then you have that option. Most people don't take it, but you have the option to say, I want to pay the expiation for the whole month. I don't have to fast, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts that. So just being elderly, where fasting makes you very tired and takes away from your energy, and actually makes it. People who are elderly, they have less reserve in their bodies, and they can be tipped over a bit quicker. Right? If you're young and you have more reserve, you can put up with more. When you're older, you can't put up with as much. Right? It's easier for us to for you to be tipped over and get into a position where you're not independent anymore. You can't take care of yourself. You're not functioning. So fasting can never be a reason for that. Fasting should never be a reason for that ever. So that's why elderly have the option to expiation. Number 3, those who postponed making up for missed days, which I explained that already. If you didn't do it between the Ramadans, then you owe to do it once. Number 4, pregnancy and breastfeeding. This is an interesting one because there's difference. The Hanafis don't. Imam Abu Hanifa doesn't see that. Abu Hanifa doesn't see this piece. Just the first 3. So these 4 and 5, Abu Hanifa does not require it. But the majority of scholars do, and they have an interesting argument for it. They say that if you broke your fast for yourself, if you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, and you broke your fast because you were getting too tired, then you don't owe an expiation. But if you broke your fast because the baby, like you broke your fast because you were scared that the baby was going to be harmed during pregnancy, or you were scared the baby wasn't going to have enough milk, so you broke your fast, then you owe the expiation. And guess what? You don't owe it. The man does. So the father pays for this, not you. So the mother doesn't pay for this. The man pays for the expiation for these days. Now, because this is an issue of difference of opinion, and because يَعْتَعُمْ بِهَا الْبَلْوَى, this happens a lot, it's always happening, I side on safety for this one, and I put it up there. And I tell anyone, you break your fast during pregnancy or breastfeeding, just have the husband pay the expiation. It's not that expensive, and it just takes you out of khilaf. It takes you out of this long, ongoing difference of opinion that's been around for 1,000 and plus years. And usually the days are maybe 7, 8 days or something, and it's not that expensive. But I'm just explaining to you that it's not agreed upon. Abu Hanifa, the Hanafis have a very good argument of why you don't need to do it, and the others break it down based on why you're doing it. And I find that breakdown is difficult. Like, I don't know if I'm breaking. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, 20 per day. Yeah. Yes, everything that you owe is preferred that you pay it where you live. So I'm going to talk about that when we come to Zakat al-Fitr at the end. I'm going to point that out more specifically. But Zakat and Zakat al-Fitr and Sadaqat and is preferred, and Kaffarat are preferred, and Nadhr, where you've made an oath or you made a conditional oath, then you should pay it where you are. Now, do scholars allow it to be paid abroad? Yes. They have some conditions and they allow for it. But I'll come back to this at the end when I talk about Zakat al-Fitr, so I'll point it out because I have a little bit of a rant I have to go on for everyone to hear. All right, so next. Yallah. Okay, so some of the sunan or the recommended actions of fasting. Number one, so daily and late suhoor and early fast breaking. These are two mechanisms that are installed in Sharia to protect Sharia from bid'ah. To protect it from someone deciding, you know what, I'm going to worship Allah better, I'm going to have my suhoor an hour earlier, so I'm fasting an extra hour. God does not want that from you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not require you, nor ask of you to fast more than the timing that He put for you. He does not want you to do anything more. Or I'm going to make my suhoor, my futur an hour later, so I fasted an extra hour for God. Nope. Do exactly what he did alayhi salatu wasalam. So the more you make suhoor late and the more you make futur earlier, you're following the sunnah more closely, and that is what you're asked to do. So it's a sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salam to break your fast right at the time of Maghrib, right at the Allahu Akbar, you break your fast, and then you do your suhoor right before Salat al-Fajr, meaning just a couple of minutes before Fajr. Breaking fast with moist dates. Moist dates, if you can't find moist dates, then dry dates, and if you can't find dry dates, then water. Now, if you don't like dates and you can't do dates, then just go to water. Water is fine. Like there are some cultures that for them dates is something that they don't enjoy eating and they find difficult and may even bother them. It's rare, but it can happen. And the Prophet ﷺ, this is a sunnah. He would break his fast on moist dates. So if you can afford to do that or you can, go ahead. If you can't, then don't break your fast on just regular food. Break your fast on water because that's closer to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's more appropriate. So break your fast on water if you're not a big date fan. But the sunnah is moist dates and then dry dates and then water. Number 4, making dua. Whether you do that right before breaking your fast or right after breaking your fast, this is an issue that scholars have differed upon. It's not a big one. Whatever you've been taught or whatever you're accustomed to, go ahead and do it. I tend to do both. Make a little bit of dua until adhan al-maghrib. Once al-maghrib adhan goes off, you have your futur, iftar, and then you go make dua for a few moments after. It's a nice habit to get yourself and your children into. And then, if you pray, by the way, after you break your fast, it's okay. Like Maghrib is the sunnah for Maghrib, or the sunnah of praying Salat al-Maghrib as a fard, is to do it early, is to do it very quickly. So there's two ways to do this. Either you break your fast with some water and dates and then pray Maghrib and then have your food, or you can have some food and then pray Maghrib as long as you know that you're not going to go into too close to Salat al-Isha. So both are acceptable. I tend to advise to pray earlier. Break your fast, have some dates, have some water, pray Maghrib, pray Sunnah, and then go have whatever food you're going to have. It's nicer that you eat better that way and you're not as rushed and you're not pushing Maghrib. But both habits are acceptable. Like scholars have allowed in books of fiqh for both to be done, so it's not a big one. Number 5, fasting from sin. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more inshallah next week where we talk about the essence of fasting. But it makes no sense, just so everyone thinks about this, it absolutely makes no sense for you to be fasting from halal, for you not to eat halal food, drink halal water, and have relations with your halal spouse, but then go do haram. Like it makes no sense at all. Like it's very weird. Like there's no logic to it. So when we talk about fasting, and the Prophet ﷺ says this, like he has actual wordings of this, and I'll share this with you next week. يعني من لم يدع قول الزور والعمل به فليس لله حاجة في أن يدع طعامه وشرابه. Like someone who is lying and acting based on lying and giving false testimonies, and Allah does not need them to not eat and drink that day. By all means, just eat and drink. What are you doing? This is I'm telling you that halal things now are not allowed. You're going to go and do haram things. So a sunnah of fasting is that you make sure that you're fasting not just from halal, you're fasting also from sin. So these are the 5, and one of the habits that we have in Syria for early fast breaking is that mu'adhin would say Allahu Akbar, and then someone would be standing there to give them something to drink. And then they would continue the adhan, just so that the mu'adhin does not, because the mu'adhin is allowed to finish their adhan, and then have their, because that's his job, but the sunnah, because to have an early iftar, so there'll always be someone standing right beside the mu'adhin. He says Allahu Akbar, and then he brings water, and then he continues his adhan until the end. And it's a habit, I think, in Sham and other parts of the Middle East. I always thought it was a nice habit. All right. Ya Allah, Ya Mu'in, Ya Kareem. All right, Taraweeh. All right. So the value for Taraweeh revolves around the time you spend and the Quran that's recited. It's really not about numbers. I've said this a lot, and I think everyone who's here is only here because they tend to agree, or else they wouldn't still be here with me, because I have roasted this topic too many times in my life. Numbers don't matter. They never did. The Prophet ﷺ did 8, and he did 10, and he did 13, and Umar al-Khattab put people together to do 20. Imam Malik said 46. Why? Because the people in Mecca were doing 20. And after each 4, they would go and do tawaf. So Imam Malik couldn't figure out how to make an equivalent for that of people of Medina. So he said, we do 4, and when they go to do their tawaf, we do another 4. So he added them all up. It turned out to be that number. So they would do, all these numbers are fine. It's really not based on number. It's based on how much time you spend and how much hudur of the heart and how much khushu' you attain and how much closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you're able to bring to yourself. This is really the point of Taraweeh. And the best thing to do in Taraweeh is you choose a masjid that is praying where the Quran is being recited, the whole thing, just once. Just one, I'm using that term, just once. Because really, the Quran used to, before we turned into the slobs that we are today, the Quran would be recited in Taraweeh 2 or 3 times, easily. 2 or 3 times easily, because that's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You stand and pray for 2-3 hours and recite in Ramadan. So we're not saying that, just at least hear the Quran 1 full time. So find a masjid that does that, and then stay with the imam until they're done. Like stay until they're done, don't leave before. So you get the ajr of the praying of the full night. So you get the ajr of the full night, just stay. It will be difficult a little bit, but this is the point of Ramadan. You're pushing your limits a little bit. You're trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Apply yourself a little bit. We run here an hour and 20 minutes, or an hour and 25 minutes. And I've timed these things. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I timed every type of Taraweeh, 20 rak'ah, 8 rak'ah, 30 rak'ah. I've timed how long the rak'ah takes, and I hold every poor imam who stands up here to the minute. Once they're a minute over, they have to look back at me. He knows. Looks back, I'm like, nope, you're a minute over. And they have to stand there ashamed until the end of the day, because I timed them. You have to get through it on time. Why? Out of respect for people. Because I know that a lot of you are trying to apply yourselves. I want to help you. I want to help you pray the full night without feeling that you need to get the itch to get out. So we try to time it, make sure that it's the flow. Wallah, the poor imams that pray with us, we train them. We train them on pace, and we train them on rhythm and on sound and on. It's actually a full production. It takes a lot of work to get the Ramadan, and I turn into a monster in Ramadan. If someone is late, I decapitate them. They're done. I will not speak to them for months if they don't show up for what they have to do. Ramadan, the goal of this is obviously to bring ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but our goal as well is to make sure that we help you on that journey, because you're here and you want to be closer. So to make it as easy, but try to apply yourself. Don't do the diet Taraweeh where you're just basically doing a little bit of yoga or Pilates after you've overeaten at Maghrib. And make sure that you don't eat too much at Futur. Wait until it's the winter. In the winter, you'll be fine. Like once we're nice and cozy in January or February, you'll be fine. Because Maghrib will be at 5 o'clock. You can eat. We won't be praying Taraweeh until 7 because most people are at work anyways. So it'll be 2 hours, you'll be fine. You can have a full meal and then you'll go pray Taraweeh, come back, have another meal, and you'll still be fine. But when you only have a little bit of time, don't come to Taraweeh and burp and cause a public health hazard. Make sure that you come and you're capable of standing, you're capable of enjoying the prayer, you're able to listen to what the Imam is saying, you're not tired feeling that you just want this to end. That's not healthy, it's not nice for you. Like your experience of Taraweeh is very negative because you're so tired, because you just ate so much. We're mammals. What does a mammal do once it fills its belly? It needs to lie down for a couple of hours so it can so eat something simple and come for Taraweeh. I've been doing this for since 1998. You have a few dates, water, a little bit of soup, you come for Taraweeh. After Taraweeh, you go eat and you go to sleep. You end up with one meal per day. No one does this. Everyone just looks at me and does like this, and then everyone comes in, they're full. Don't do it, especially if you're younger. If you're younger, get used to doing this. Wallahi, it's a good habit for you. Wallahi, you'll enjoy Taraweeh, and you'll actually stand there, and you're enjoying the time, and you're not tired. You'll just be difficult the first 2 or 3 days, because you're so hungry, and you want to devour all of the beautiful food that your mother has been cooking all day. And no one wants to eat leftovers or later on. But once you get over yourself from that perspective, you'll be totally fine. Both praying in home and congregation are fine. Congregation is better. With the imam till the end is better. Make sure you're doing a khatam. So Zakat al-Fitr and Eid prayer. So Zakat al-Fitr, so you're allowed, some scholars allow you to pay Zakat al-Fitr from the first day of Ramadan. They're a minority, but they are there. So you can do it. The Shafi'i opinion is a bit more lenient. It allows you from the 15th day of Ramadan. The majority of scholars require you to do it 3 or 4 days prior to Eid. Now, I think the mid-month timing is a good balance. It gives enough time for the charities to get the money to the people who need it before Eid. Now, if you don't pay your Zakat al-Fitr until after Eid, the majority of scholars don't see that you've performed the Zakat al-Fitr. Some scholars allow you until Asr. Some scholars allow. It's a very small number. So if you make the mistake and somehow you forget to pay Zakat al-Fitr, then inshallah, if you do it right after Salat al-Eid, inshallah you'll find a fatwa that allows you to still see yourself as paid it, but you should do it in advance of that, inshallah ta'ala. It's around 15 to 20. I think 15 is wrong now with inflation. I think $20 is what it should be. This is an older, these slides are from a couple of years ago, so I haven't really updated them. So it's 20 to 25 per person per family. So the man is responsible for that, unless the lady is the breadwinner of the family, and that's a whole different financial breakdown that has to be agreed upon beforehand. Otherwise, the husband is responsible for Zakat al-Fitr, to pay for yourself, your wife, your children, and any fetus that exists inside the womb of your wife that's over 120 days old. So once it's over 4 months, khalas, now you owe full zakat al-Fitr for the fetus, because now the ruh has been granted to this living being, and you owe Zakat al-Fitr for it. Zakat al-Fitr should be paid locally. It is absolutely unacceptable for the Zakat al-Fitr of a community of 40,000 people to go abroad while there are people within the community who are struggling. We all carry sin for this. All of us collectively, we are accountable for the people in our community who are not getting Zakat al-Fitr, to help them throughout Eid while we send it overseas. So there has to be amongst us a group that specializes in doing that. Shaykh al-Janabi, Allah Yajzil Khair, and a number of brothers with him have put together a group, and they're actually going and they're sniffing out the people who need the help, and they have a list of them, and they can take your normal zakat as well. And they can take your Kaffarah, and they can take your Zakat al-Fitr and give it to people locally. I think we should, as a community, make sure that we invest in this a little bit more. Once you take care of the people you have locally, you can send overseas to Gaza and to people in Sudan, example, in Lebanon, wherever they may, or Myanmar, wherever people are struggling and we know that Muslims aren't doing well, you can send it overseas. But you can't do that while the people who are next door in the city aren't doing well. And I didn't believe this in 2018. Like when someone told me this, I'm like, no, there's no Muslims in the city who are. And then it was presented to me, and it was very embarrassing once it was presented. Like single mothers with children, and at the end of the day, there's nothing to feed the kids. It's absolutely heartbreaking that it exists within the community. So that has to be addressed and dealt with, and we need to kind of put more. We have to actually. And this is a part of centralizing our finances as a community. We have to centralize the finances and take care of ourselves, and then we can take care of others. So that answers, inshallah, your question that you're looking into. But you can send it overseas, obviously, once that is taken care of. So make sure that you take some interest in this. It can be given from the beginning of Ramadan. It can. I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying it can. That opinion gives it allowance. I think middle of Ramadan, 15th of Ramadan is a good time to give the Zakat al-Fitr. And you should make sure you give it before Eid prayer. Eid prayer, so it's a highly recommended, considered by many to be a fard kifaya, meaning that there has to be some people who do it. If no one does it, then we're at fault. Some scholars go as far to say it's fard ayn, meaning it's obligatory upon everybody. If you miss it, then some scholars allow you to do it in congregation with a few people. It should be a prayer that is done in an open space. We shouldn't have like with this fiasco that we have in the city where 35 Eid prayers are occurring. This is absolutely ridiculous. That's not how Eid prayer is designed to be. Like, it takes away the whole concept of what Eid prayer is for. Eid prayer is for the gathering of the congregation, where a man and his wife and their children and even their horses, if we don't have horses, but if you were to have horses, you take them with you. Like, they would take dawab home with them when they went for Eid, and they would do it in an open space. So how many spaces like that can't do Eid in the city? I argue three. I argue we need 3 spaces that can encompass the majority of the Muslims who want to go for Eid. We run 3 Eids, and that's it. And a lot of because a lot of the fundraising, a lot of the networking, a lot of the advertising, the marketing of Islamic action can happen there. You have the 10,000 people there. And why? Most of what I do here is just preaching to the choir. It's the same people. I know you, you know me. We've known each other for years. It's the people who don't show up for these things that we need to connect with, and they come to Eid. So really, we have to invest a little bit in this aspect. So Eid is supposed to happen outside. Eid al-Adha, the sunnah is to push it a little bit later, and Eid al-Adha is to bring it a little bit earlier. But honestly, the timings can differ. Like you can do Eid prayer right after Fajr. You can do it right before Dhuhr. All of that is permissible within Islam. It's acceptable. So really, attend what you're capable of attending. But as an individual, try to make sure that you don't be absent. You're not absent from Salat al-Eid with no udhr, with no excuse. So make sure that you do it because it's one of the highest. Like when you talk when some say it's a sunnah, they say it's a sunnah mu'akkada, like they use a different phrasing for it. That is an extremely highly recommended sunnah. To the point where that's what some scholars actually say it's obligatory. Like you should go, you have to go to it. So make sure that you take some interest in this aspect of things, even for ladies who are ha'id. So a lady who is ha'id, who is menstruating, she should still go for Eid with her family and sit. So this for Jumu'ah, no. For Jumu'ah, you shouldn't. Like sisters aren't recommended to come to Jumu'ah prayer when they're menstruating or when they are no. They can, but they're not recommended to do so. However, for Eid, no, they're recommended to go regardless. And then, so that's kind of what that's what I have for you regarding Eid prayer. So that's kind of the breakdown of all the aspects of Fiqh of Ramadan. I will share these slides so that if you forgot or you don't know what the invalidators are, you can ask questions. Go ahead. Thank you. Yeah. So there will never be a Salat al-Eid in this building, ever. There is no circumstance, there is nothing can ever happen. Like there's no cosmic event that will cause there to be an Eid in this building, ever. Not now, not in the future. Not if we have to pray outside in the middle of the snow on a night like tonight, we would never pray inside. It's not fair. Eid is a time where people, first of all, the sunnah is to be outside. Secondly, it's supposed to be a time where people actually are able to enjoy their time. If you try to fit 1,000 people in this space here, they're going to be absolutely miserable. So is the imam who's giving the khutbah. So it's not equipped for that, inshallah. But I don't know where we're going to have Eid this year, but we'll see. Yeah. 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 Again, if you use it and the drop goes down the throat, you lose your fast. So you can use it. It doesn't break your fast, as I explained. But if you end up having the drop go down your throat somehow, then you lose your fast if that happens. If not, then you're fine, inshallah. That's my fatwa on the matter, or that's my opinion on this issue. If you have questions, put your hand. This is the time to ask them. I'm not taking no texts, and my wife is not going to tell me someone had to send me. I don't care. Like I'm not listening to anything after all. This is it. Yeah, you ask your questions now, and then that's no more. Yes, go ahead. So every person, every baligh aqil Muslim, so every Muslim that is conscious and of age, male or female, as long as they're not enslaved and they're hur and they're free, then they owe Zakat al-Fitr, as long as they have enough for the day. You could be in debt, but if you have enough for that day, like you have enough food, almost everyone in this room that'll be the case for, then you owe the $20 for yourself. And for example, if you're a young man, if your father takes care of that for you, that's fine. Like your father can say, you know what, I'm gonna pay your Zakat al-Fitr for you this year. That's okay. You don't have to do it yourself. But if not, then you owe that for yourself. So even if you're a student, you still owe the $20 for Zakat al-Fitr, unless your parents are going to pay it for you. My dad paid it for me, and he still does. Like I pay it for. I tell him, "Khalas, I'm paying it for my family." He still pays it for me anyways. I don't know why. But yeah, I'm now paying it for myself, obviously. Yeah.
No, I was going to ask that. At what point does it become obligatory on you?
No, once you're baligh, once you're an adult, you owe Zakat al-Fitr yourself. Some parents like to keep on paying it because they still feel that they're responsible for their family, especially older fathers like to do that. But no, once you're an adult, you owe this. If you don't have enough for, you're barely making it, then you deserve it. And come to Sheikh al-Janabi, he'll give you some of the Zakat al-Fitr. So the last piece that I forgot to say. So I forgot this piece, subhanAllah. So Zakat al-Fitr, there's this ongoing difference of opinion. It's not really a difference of opinion. I wish it was, because difference of opinion is a nice term that we have in Islam that's very protective for us in terms of the variety. This is more of a online war that starts roughly around the 27th of Ramadan, just before the big Layla. You have a couple of these Facebook nights who go online and they put how praying Zakat al-Fitr using money is bid'ah and it's wrong and it's this and it's that. This is an issue that was argued over a millennium ago. A millennium ago. Not a century. A millennium. They talked about this ago. 1,000 years. They've agreed. And there's two opinions on this matter. That you have to, some scholars think that you should give out qut. Qut mean as in a bag of rice, a bag of wheat, a bag of barley, or a bag of dates. And other scholars, the Hanafi specifically, and a lot of the madhahib have this opinion within them, allow you to give it as cash, right? Now, if you live in a position where you can give it out as qut, like you're living in a prairie, or you're living in a village somewhere, and you have people around you who are in need, and you can go buy qut and give it out to people, then great. Aside from that, most of us don't have that opportunity, so you give it out as cash, and what most of the charities do is that they make sure that food is bought for the people with that wealth. But this is an issue of valid difference of opinion, and I think taking the permissibility to give cash is totally fine. You're welcome to do the opposite if you want to. That's not a problem, but I don't think it's an issue of where we have to like call each other names because of it. Yes. No, so as long as you gave it on time, and the person who's receiving it is okay with receiving it, and they're telling you that I'll take care of it, then you have removed your responsibility for the matter. However, you have to do some due diligence. Like you have to do your due diligence in terms of researching that piece, making sure that the ones who are taking the zakah, it's called tawkeel bil zakah, al-wakala, meaning I am making you're the person who's taking on my behalf the responsibility of distribution of zakah. If I have reason to trust you and you've accepted this responsibility, then this is not a problem. I'll tell you what usually happens so you feel comfortable. Most of the charities that take Zakat al-Fitr, they pay out Zakat al-Fitr in large sums after the 15th day of Ramadan. So they pay it up front, and then they take your Zakat to match what they've already paid. So when you come and say, I'm giving Zakat al-Fitr to this organization, 5 minutes before Salat al-Eid, how is it? It's already been paid, so you're good. Now you're wrong for doing it that way, and you need a slap on the wrist because that's not how you do this. But it works because it's already been paid. Like the Zakat al-Fitr has already been paid by this organization, and you are just now basically putting your money in the place of the food that's been given. And the scholars, the Mujamma' al-Fiqh al-Islami fi Saudiya, and also Azhar, and the Rabat al-Ulama al-Suriyin, as far as I know, these three have allowed for this. Like meaning the charities that do this have taken the fatwa from these three bodies of scholars, and it's a valid way of doing it. Wallahu alam. So you're safe. But I would say, again, the advice is at the 15th day of Ramadan, give it out. Or something like that, so that you're not, because you can forget. You can get indulged in the worship aspect of Ramadan, especially the last 10 nights, and you can completely forget what you're doing. You have a question with your hand up there? Go ahead.
What happens if, let's say I made the expiation,
Yeah.
and then I did not do it in that year?
You still owe it with no change to it. I doubt that you will ever owe that for the next 10 years in your life, but inshallah, good question though. Good question, very good question though. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. No. So anything that's nourishing going through the vein will break your fast for sure. Anything that's not nourishing going through the vein has two opinions. My opinion is that it breaks the fast as well. So my opinion that anything that goes through the veins will break your fast immediately. Wallahu alam. That's my opinion on this matter. Yes. Yeah. So you break your fast. Just because you have to doesn't make your fast not broken. You still break your fast. Now the question becomes, is this something temporary? Meaning you just have, for example, a very bad cellulitis or infection where you require IV antibiotics, for example. Then, and you take that for 7 or 14 days. Then you break your fast. All those days the fast is broken. You have to make up for them later. If the person has to take something in the vein every day because they have a terminal illness or a chronic illness that they're not going to get better from, like someone who is on dialysis, for example, then that person is not going to fast ever, so they just pay a minor expiation, which is $20 for every day that they break their fast. Okay?
Talk about zakat.
Yeah.
My idea.
No.
Most of people, most of Arabs here, family have very good health, but you know, you don't go to work. You see how much you take from us, that or sometimes invest of the business, how much you make.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, if they can go outside to push back the heat. That's what I mean about the money to help. Most of Arabs here work under the table, I don't know, and they don't want to,
Uh.
by tax or tax. But actually, that's what they can. Now, suppose somebody steal you or give you something wrong, and you suddenly show him. If you say bad words or anything, ya haram, something like this, does it break the fast?
No, it doesn't break your fast. It's just you lose the ajr. We'll talk about that next week. So using profanity doesn't cause your fast to be broken. Like there's no word that you can say that will cause you to not be fasting that day, but you do lose ajr obviously once you do these things. So like looking at haram or saying haram or listening to haram or acting in a way where you're engaging in sin you shouldn't do that obviously. It doesn't cause you to lose your fast. Here we're talking fiqh. I'm not talking spirituality. There's reasons you do certain things and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept your fast from you. And that's really the scary piece. But from a fiqh perspective, that day you did not invalidate your fast. You made a mistake, but you didn't invalidate your fast. It doesn't matter whether it's controlled or uncontrolled. It doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
Important point for me. Somebody had started pray and he say I finished Quran 2 or 3 times in Ramadan, something like this. And after your daughter, husband, told him steal everything, and after and you hit him too much. Even his son kicked out from Egypt and you wait for him 22,500 to come to Canada. And after you surprise, he provide your house, kick you out, and you and his wife, about this Hajj, about this man, he pray and Hajj. Did he have any khushu, anything to be? Did his khushu tell him steal, yes, no, everything? I'm so sorry about this.
I don't know. This is a personal question that you should probably bring to in a personal setting. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you bring it in a personal.
Extra freedom for women that also help,
Yeah.
a lot of women to break.
طيب.
Family separation, that's what I mean.
جزاك الله خير. No.
Sorry about this, but this is very important point.
Oh, بارك الله فيك. جزاك الله خير. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So there's like some medications and others
Yeah.
which are like they're nourishing, but like they're not nourishing when you take them. It's like later.
Give me an example.
Slow release. I don't have an example off the top of my head, but like they act like slowly like throughout.
So you have to give it like you need to bring what the medication is. Anything that you take by mouth will invalidate your fast.
No, so you don't take it during the fast. You take it before, but it acts like during.
So it depends whether. So if you take it when you're not fasting, right? Unless the reason that you took it was to make your fasting easier, then you're fine. Like if you took it with the intention is that this is going to help me fast, then that's not acceptable, that's not permissible. But if you took it because you actually need it, this is something that you require for a medical condition, then you're fine. If you took it when you're not fasting, that makes sense? Yeah. And you always give me an example here because that would be helpful.
For example, the comment like it's not going to relieve your headache.
Yeah, but it's not nourishing. So you need the medical definition of nourishment. A medical definition of nourishment. So that's why you need to give me the example because I have to see if this is a medical definition here or not. Yes?
There is a vitamin C solution at the part of time dilation, which releases slowly in the body.
And vitamins aren't nourishing either. Vitamins aren't actually nourishing. It's interesting. Vitamins don't provide you with nourishment, despite like the common belief here. The vitamins don't give you any nourishment. Time delayed, as long as you take it during the night, you don't take it during the day, and you're not taking it with the intention of trying to nourish yourself during your fasting, then you're fine. If you're prescribed this by a physician, then you're fine to take that, inshallah. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Yes?
What about blood extraction?
Very good. So blood extraction, if, I thought I had that there. I don't have that there, eh? SubhanAllah, I'll add that there. That's a good point. I remember talking about this every year, but I thought maybe I don't have it on the slide. Very good, Jazakallah khair. So hijama is one of the differed upon topics within Islam, and that's a good example because that's really the example of, for example, donating blood. So my opinion on the matter, and there's different opinions here from scholars, is that donating blood breaks your fast. So if you donate a full liter or half a liter of blood, then it breaks your fast. If you're going for a blood test, it doesn't. If you're going for a blood test where they're taking a small ampule of 10 milliliters or something just for a blood test, that doesn't break your fast. But if you donate a liter, because we have an example of that. Like there's some prophetic narrations that talk about the Prophet ﷺ saying that you shouldn't do it, it breaks your fast, and then other narrations that say that you can, it doesn't break your fast. So scholars kind of argued both. To be safe, we stay away from blood transfusions or blood donation out of it, but small blood tests are the equivalent of someone just being cut. So you got to cut and you blood a little bit. It doesn't break your fast, right? And we don't have a reason to believe that doing it intentionally will break. Like there's nowhere in Islam that if I intentionally took a knife and cut myself, then that's going to break my fast. Hijama is more of a medical procedure that takes out a large amount of blood that you wouldn't otherwise do without some medical supervision, right? You just do that to yourself, you're probably going to die because you don't know what you're doing. So well, this is my opinion on the matter, and both opinions exist within the books of fiqh and within the fatwas of the scholars. So blood donation breaks your fast. Blood tests, you should be fine. Okay? Yes. Yeah. Again, it doesn't. You're not donating that blood. I hope, at least. I hope that you're not donating that blood. Yeah. Yeah. So nicotine patches. It depends on the situation. That's a case by case. So that's case by case. So you need to talk to a scholar because a nicotine patch, it depends on what the dose is and why they're using it. If they're using it because they can't get through the day, then there's some permissibility here that can exist, but most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time you don't need the nicotine patch to get through the day. You can use it during the night. It's a 12-hour release. You can do it over the night and they can take it off during the day, which is what the scholars of North America and AMJA put out a few years ago, and I agree that that's probably the safer way to go by it, wallahu alam. So nicotine patches should be taken off during the day, wallahu alam, because it runs the risk of impermissibility. Yeah. No, mouthwash, as long as you don't swallow the water, right? So mouthwashing is fine, just don't swallow the water, yeah. So an iron infusion is liquid going through the vein. So for my opinion, it does. So you may find some scholars who say iron infusions are fine. I take the opinion that you lose your fat. And again, like you don't necessarily, like you can go for 30 days without an iron infusion. If you can't, that means this person usually has a chronic disease that with it, they don't have to fast to begin with. That makes sense? So sometimes it'll answer itself. The problem will solve itself depending on what the issue actually is. But iron infusions, wallahu alam, will break the fast, yes. So you're allowed to taste with the tip of your tongue during Siyam, especially for ladies who are cooking for their families and men who work as chefs, for example. So you're allowed to put something on the tip of your tongue to taste it, if it's too salty, if it's too this, it's too that. But then you have to actually, this is where you're required to do your due diligence and spitting out all of the resulting saliva. So, we're human beings, so the moment something that's tasteful touches the tongue, you salivate heavily. So that saliva should not be swallowed. That saliva should be spat out because it was derived or produced from the tasting. But the tasting on the tip of the tongue, there's permission for it for ladies who are cooking for their families and for men who work as chefs. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And this is like a widespread and well-known opinion. Yeah.
So it's like the iron question from earlier. So if you're anemic, does it fall under the tasting where you make the intention you're going to fast?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the same thing. So if you just make the intention, and if you can't, now if you're anemic, but it's a chronic illness, like you have a chronic illness, a reason for being anemic, then that's different. Because that way you can just pay expiation and not fast because you're not allowed to. Like if you're given a diagnosis by a physician that you are too anemic to fast, then you can just not fast that month, pay expiation. The question that becomes, is this temporary? If it's temporary, you owe those days later. If it's not temporary, then you don't owe them. That make sense? Okay, yes. Okay, good. Yeah, so anytime, even if you're fasting like to an hour before Maghrib, but then you lose control, then you can break your fast. Like you're not accountable when it's severe fatigue and you are fearing now for your personal well-being, your physical and psychological well-being, then you can break your fast. You don't owe expiation. You do owe that day later though. Right? So, but this is a subjective judgment. Don't come and ask a sheikh. Someone once called me. Wallahi, someone once called me specifically to ask me if they could break their fast. Like, what do you think I have? What do you think? On what committee do I think I sit to offer this answer? I have no idea. You have to make this is your judgment. Are you able to continue? And then it's this long ongoing of it. You have to make the severe fatigue is a reasonable and acceptable religious excuse to break your fast. But it's subjective. You have to just make that decision yourself. You still owe the day afterwards, and you don't owe expiation for it. So just be careful with it. But I mean, if you're someone who does heavy labor and it's during a certain time of the year, then you can always come and talk to a sheikh beforehand and say, this is what I do. And this is, for example, bus drivers or truck drivers. They're technically traveling all the time, right? So they can technically break their fast all the time. And then they tell me, well, sheikh, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, so I'll never fast. So they have to make a decision here, and they've been offered, like these people who do that, who are constantly traveling, are offered the same fatwa of the terminally ill or the elderly, where they just pay expiation for the full month and do what they do, because this is their way of making a living. They're not required to change their way of making it. They're not required to change their profession because of this. No, that's your profession. That's what you do. Now, some people, I don't want to say who. Yani will just get up every day on Ramadan and drive for 80 kilometers so they can break their fast and then come back because they don't want to fast. And that does not allow you the permission. Like, travel has to be purposeful. So, for example, travel for ma'asiyah is not acceptable for the majority of scholars. Some of them accept it, but the majority don't. Like, if you're traveling and the intention is to perform a ma'asiyah, then you don't get any of their rulings. You're not allowed to break your fast or shorten your prayers. Like, you're like, well, that person probably wouldn't do it. No, some people will. Some people have that duality. Like, I'm going for a ma'asiyah, but I still want to pray it. I'm not going to close the door with Allah completely. Yeah, but you're not allowed the permission anymore. So the traveling has to be purposeful in its own sense, either for knowledge or for work or for salat rahim, something that's permissible Islamically. You get the fatwa for it. But if you're doing it just because you want to break your fast, that's I've seen people get in the car. Let's drive for 80 kilometers so that we can go have a burger at a place. That's not. We'll drive to Mississauga, have food. Well, we're traveling. Yeah, but you still owe those days, right? So that's not permissible. It's like, well, this is summer. I don't want to owe it in the summer. I'll owe it. No. You have the travel has to be for a different reason. Wallahu a'lam. All right, one more. The last one. Yes, go ahead.
Like for extraction or teeth clean.
Yeah.
Is that?
So brushing your teeth doesn't. Now, dental cleaning, you most likely are going to swallow water. So you're going to break your fast physically. Like, you're going to actually end up swallowing water whether you like it or not. And so if you go to the dentist and they're doing you're getting your teeth cleaned, if you swallow water, you break your fast. If you don't swallow water, you don't break your fast. I can tell you that 100% you're going to swallow some water. It's impossible. Like, there's someone with a thing in your mouth. You can't help it. But you don't get it. There's no rukhsah for that. Like, you can't say, well, I was cleaning my teeth, whatever went down doesn't count. No, it counts. You lose your fast. But if you need to do it that day, if this is a procedure that you require, like you're struggling, there's pain, then you can go do that. And if the water goes down, you break your fast, you make up for it. That's fine as well. So there is permissibility if you require this procedure for a medical reason. All right. So again, the same thing. So they can take a tooth out and that doesn't break your fast. But if you end up drinking water or blood or something, yeah, so that lidocaine is not nourishing. So lidocaine is intramuscular or subcutaneous and it's not nourishing, so it doesn't break your fast. But you're most likely going to swallow blood or swallow water. So you're going to lose, and you have a good reason for that, because this is a medical procedure and you're ill. So that day you don't fast, you don't owe an expiation for it, you don't owe a kaffarah, you just make up for it later. I'll end with that, inshallah.